My name is Bri Sargent. I am so glad that you joined me here today. I have been a safety professional for nearly 20 years. I have trained over 100 safety managers just like you. So if you're kind of like into that jam too, of like, how do I get management commitment? Then you want to be here on Safety Geek. Today, we are talking about eliminating or at least reducing your paperwork. How about that? What I wanted to start off with was one of the biggest issues I've ever had since becoming an adult. Something that has driven me crazy and driven me mad up until I would say the last year. And that is, you're gonna laugh at this. I hate grocery shopping. I hate grocery shopping more than anything. And I'm like, there has got to be a more efficient way to do this. There has to be, right? And my whole life I had been saying this from the time I was in my 20s up until about a year and a half ago, maybe even 2 years ago. And I was like, there's some smart people out there and they need to solve this problem. So you know for sure, I don't go grocery shopping anymore. I am like a 100% grocery delivery person. I'd get some from Amazon, but I also get delivery. So obviously there was solutions out there to make my life more efficient. And that's why it had annoyed me. And that's how I feel about paperwork. I know you're thinking, Bri, where are you going with this story? But this is how I feel about paperwork. I feel like a lot of the paperwork that we do is just so inefficient and it is a waste of our time, right? Because when you really look at the paperwork that we have to do, how often is it really ever used? How often do people actually look at it? I mean, we're filing it away and signing our names like a million times for nothing in case somebody sues us, right? That type of thing. So I kind of look at paperwork and say, there has to be a more efficient way. And that's what I want to talk to you guys about. Now, we've all heard the saying that if it's not documented, it wasn't done. And I get that. And I believe it, right? Because there's a lot of people that'll tell you, yep, I inspected that ladder and there's no documentation that it was done and the ladder breaks and the person falls and hurts themselves, right? And I chose ladder in that example because there is no requirement to document a ladder inspection. But you always want to because of the fact that if it's not documented, it wasn't done, right? So when you look at the amount of paperwork that's involved in our jobs, we spend so much time on paperwork. So what we want to do is look at that paperwork and then create a more efficient way of doing the same thing, of documenting it so that way we're protected, but doing it in a manner where we're not just overloaded and having people sign their names a million times. So what paperwork am I talking about here? It's like safety training, especially new hire training. Their paperwork is just outrageous, right? Policy acknowledgments, like, hey, I told you about this, sign it. Incident reports, accident investigations, all the related paperwork to incidents. So doctor's visits and claims reports and all of that. Like even now, like not even related to work. If I go to the doctor for something, I get paperwork in the mail following that in the form of an EOB from my insurance company. It's such a waste of paper. Behavior-based safety, you might have paperwork for. So you might be documenting your coaching, you might be documenting your observations, your assessments, any incentive programs you have, you probably have some documentation with that. Inspections, hazard reports, specific hazards. So like if you've had an IH study done, engineering reports, SDSs, right? Tons of paperwork. Disciplinary action. So if someone's written up for a safety violation, you got to track that so that way you know whether or not this is the second time, third time, fourth time, whatever. Or if you want to terminate that employee, you have the backup in order to do that. Contractors. So you have the contracts, the hold harmless agreements, the contractor reviews, the project reviews, all of that stuff. It's all paperwork and it adds up. So first, what I want you to look at with your paperwork is say, why do I even need this paperwork? What is the purpose of it? And more than likely, what will come up is one of three things, and two of them are related. One, it's a regulatory inspection requirement, right? So you're worried you're going to have a regulatory inspection and you want to be able to prove that you actually did whatever task it was. Two would be a third-party audit, which is very similar to a regulatory inspection. And the third would be lawsuits. And I will tell you, lawyers have probably made me, because of the paperwork that lawyers have created for me, it's made me actually hate their profession because I'm just like, everything I do is mainly because of lawyers. Every piece of paperwork is to cover my butt in case I am ever sued. So preventing lawsuits is a whole nother topic that we'll probably do another broadcast on, because you can take steps to prevent lawsuits. The simple answer is have really good relationships and always do the right thing. If you're doing those two things, people aren't going to really sue you. So then that could help you reduce your paperwork. All right. So when you look at that paperwork and you go, okay, why do I need it? The next thing I want you to do is decide, does it have to be on paper? Because that's a big question, especially now. I will tell you, 10 years ago, they always required everything to be on paper, but now digital signatures are allowed. So does this document have to be on paper? So then think, like, most things can be electronic. Consider the ease of access, right? So if you need somebody to access that document relatively quickly and frequently, then you might want to have it on paper. But if no one really needs to access it except during an audit, doesn't really need to be on paper, okay? Or maybe it's for ease of use, because scanning it and filing it in a digital system is going to take way too long. So ease of use, I just keep it in the paper format. So think about some stuff that comes to you in the mail that you want to keep. I'm thinking of like injury files and things like that. So I would get like claims reports and stuff like that nobody ever really looked at again. But I didn't necessarily want to throw them out in case it did become a lawsuit, in case it did become bigger, but I'm not going to take the effort to scan it and save it to a file. So that would be an ease of use. So I would just throw it into a file in my office. So consider, am I keeping it on paper for ease of use or ease of access? Or is it just as good being electronic and keeping it digitally? So I like to keep my safety programs in paper format. When employees need to access them, they can access them very quickly, and they don't need to go through me, and they don't need to have computer access. Secondly, I like to keep my training documentation in paper because that's the way it's given to me a lot of times, and I can just take how it's given to me and throw it into a binder. So keep that in mind, that those are my ease of access, ease of use reasons for keeping paper. But next, I ask myself, who needs to see this paperwork and why? Typically, there are only 4 reasons why people need to see paperwork. And that would be a regulatory inspection or a third-party audit, or maybe your corporate office, right? And all of those are kind of related, and they would be perfectly fine with it being electronic. Regulatory inspectors prefer that it be on paper. So if you're going for like some sort of like VPP or ISO or something like that, the inspectors would prefer it be on paper. I've actually done those inspections and I prefer them to be on paper just because it's easier to access. But think about it that way, that there's those 3, and then there's after an injury. And after an injury, you have time to find that paperwork digitally. So you don't need that ease of access and ease of use. You could just print it out at that point. So really ask yourself, who needs to see this and why? And you know how we do a risk matrix for the severity or frequency of a task, a behavior, an accident, doing a vulnerability assessment type of thing. You could do the same exact thing with each documentation that you use. So think about a ladder inspection, right? I go, okay, severity means how hard is it to get to? If I had it digitally, it wouldn't be that hard to get to. To scan it, it wouldn't be that hard to do, right? Just one document, maybe once a month. Frequency, how often are they going to access that document? Probably never, unless somebody falls off a ladder and gets hurt, right? So if our frequency of access is very low and how hard it is to get, it doesn't really matter, then I'm going to keep it digitally. But if my frequency of use is really high and it's hard to get, then I may keep it on paper. So look at it that way too, of going, how often are people accessing it? And if I kept it electronically, how hard would it be for them to access it? Do I have to be involved? Do I have to be here? Do I have to access my company's network, right? So think about those things too. I used to work in multiple offices as well, and I lived with my office was in a backpack, and then I had one of those portable file drawers or file boxes. I actually still have it. It's over there. But it's a portable little file box. And when I got paperwork that had to go into another department, like in another building or another area, mine were actually 100, no, not 100 miles. They were 50 miles apart. I would just throw it in that box. So when I was traveling between locations, any paperwork that had to go into one area went in that box. But most of the time, the paperwork I was given I was given that paperwork at that location. So the training records for that location were at that location. And then any claims documents I got were at that location. But like, let's say that I was at the main location and I got claims records for somebody who was injured at the other location, and that's where their injury file was, I would just put it in the box, and the next time I went, I would have that with me. Now, next, new hire paperwork, my friends. New hire paperwork has gotten out of control. The last place I worked, when we hired somebody, we literally had them sign their name like 50 times. It was ridiculous. And you know, by the third or fourth time, they're not reading that paperwork at all. So why are you having them sign it? And my biggest thing that I hated was they would give out this list of safety rules and then they would sign it. And then if they broke the rule in some way, it would be like, well, you signed this piece of paper. See, here's your signature. And I'm like, they were signing it when they were signing their life away to get hired on their first day of work. Just because they signed it doesn't mean they're going to remember it. So that's where training, observations, and all of that comes into play. You got me, right? So new hire paperwork, the way that you can eliminate it, and I know a lot of it is not us. Most of it is HR, and it's really their job to eliminate their paperwork. But look at what you have and go, okay, can I combine this into one document? Can I have them initial on each item and then have them sign the paper at the end? Or can I hand them a safety handbook and say, I am going to read, I agree, I'm going to sign this acknowledgement that you gave it to me, and in the acknowledgement, I'm going to agree to read it. Because you can't just hand them a safety handbook and say, sign that you agree to this when they haven't even read it. So look at your new hire paperwork and see what you can combine into one. Like if you can put it all into a safety handbook, I prefer to have the safety handbook included with the employee handbook. So once again, eliminating paperwork. But if you can put it all in there and just have them acknowledge that they received a copy of it and that they agree to read it within the next 3 days and they agree to follow what is in there and come to you if they have any questions, that should be enough. Because then what you're going to do is train them and observe them and reinforce those policies anyway. Because honestly, that little signed handbook isn't saving you from anything. Not at all, not on those first few days. Next is your training paperwork. So if you can get an LMS system, which is a learning management system, it's an electronic training system, that would obviously be best. I worked in the food industry for a while and we had a system called Alchemy. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of it. It is amazing, amazing. It's mainly geared towards the food industry, although I was on their board of content creation for a while, and we were trying to move them more into the warehouse and just general safety. So I don't know if they've actually included that now. I saw an advertisement for them yesterday, and it was still kind of geared toward food safety. But with that system, every employee signed in and they were given a remote control. And then as they went through the training, and they did it as a whole classroom with a big video screen, it would stop and ask them questions that they would answer on their remote control. And if somebody answered wrong, it would repeat the section. It wouldn't tell you who answered wrong. Somebody in the class answered wrong. It would repeat it, and then everybody would have to answer again. So it was a really awesome system. It only allowed them to redo the section twice. And then after that, it marked them as a failure. And then I could go to that person individually and cover it with them individually, because there could be learning disabilities there. So it's not that they don't know and this is another reason why I don't like quizzes too, is that it's not that they don't know the information. It's that they're not good at taking a quiz. Yes, it could be that they're just goofing off and they just want to get things wrong. But you know what? If you're taking their time to retrain them constantly because of that, then eventually the goofing off part stops. And then it ends up being like, wait a minute, this is a learning disability. And I had several people like that where they were really, really good at their job, but they couldn't understand the safety stuff. So maybe I would throw in extra observations on that employee. So that way I could show like, hey, they didn't pass the fall protection quiz, but I observed them 10 times and they are wearing their fall protection correctly. They understand how to don it and doff it and all of that stuff too. So that could be a way around that too. They can't penalize you because somebody isn't good at taking a quiz. And then when you have an LMS system like that, you can just run reports from it. So that way you don't have any paperwork involved whatsoever. What I used to do too is sometimes we would do classroom training. So what I did was I would have them sign into the LMS system, but then I would give the training live. So that's another option too to help reduce your training paperwork. If you don't have that option, because those are expensive systems and some employers are not going to invest in that, and I get that, then try using rosters instead of individual paperwork. So if you have even like 400 employees, you can print out a roster with all 400 employees' names and then have them sign next to their name that they attended the training. Now, you're not going to have a quiz attached to that, but with the signature comes an acknowledgement that they understood the training. I think we need to stop the death by quiz personally. I only quiz when it's absolutely necessary. So that means when regulations require it and when it is a highly safety sensitive job, or if it's one of like the top 5 OSHA violations, like HAZCOM, then I make sure I throw a quiz in there because that's how I'm proving that I did the training on them. But technically, if you're training them on something, let's say you're training them on ergonomics, and then you're doing ergonomics evaluations and ergonomics observations, that's how you're proving that they understood the training. So you don't necessarily need the documentation to go along with that, not unless regulation requires it. So that's another way you can eliminate your paperwork, is reducing the amount of times that you're like quizzing people to what is actually required by law, by regulation. Now, another way that you can eliminate documentation is by how you're receiving documents. So what I've seen a lot of people do is they'll receive a document electronically and then they'll print it and put it in a file. And I'm like, no, when you receive it, just save it to a digital file. When you're saving it, it's actually time stamping when you got it. So that'll be good. So you'll have that documentation. But you can put other things. So think about like contractors. When they send you their annual contractor reviews or their signed contracts or HHAs, if they send them electronically, then just save them electronically. When you get IH studies done or engineering reports, generally they're going to send you an electronic version. I remember getting a stormwater plan, right? And it's a big old binder, and that's great, but they also sent me an electronic version. So I just saved it. Yeah, I had my binder version, but I didn't have to print anything out as well. So. Injury files. So you can actually have them report the injury in electronic format, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. But like, let's say that you have the employee fill out a paper injury form and they turn that into you. I would personally scan that and put that into a digital injury file, but the paper form, I'm not creating individual folders for. I would throw them all into one, like 2020 injury reports, boom, and throw it in there because nobody ever looks at them. They don't. And from that point forward, from the time that you get that injury report, everything related to that injury is going to come to you electronically. All the doctor's notes and things like that, you can have your occupational health send you electronically. All the claims information, that's going to come. You can create an electronic accident investigation. So on the rare occasion where I had an investigation that I ended up doing on paper, and I do those for more in-depth investigations and serious ones where I'm taking a lot of notes and then the notes become discoverable, I would keep it on paper, I would scan them into the file, and then I would throw those into that injury file as well. So that way I had the paper if I needed it, but it was scanned in as well. Right? And you might be thinking like, Bri, this is all said and good, but I want to go digital, but my company, they're just not going to invest any money in any of those fancy electronic programs. I get you. I totally get you, because mine wouldn't eat it either. They invested in alchemy. They were not investing in anything else. So I get that. Okay. So there are some ways that you can do this on the cheap, as long as they give you and the management team tablets. And I prefer a Windows-based tablet, but I actually had to work on a iPad, which if you've ever had to do actual work on an iPad and not play, it's not fun. They are not designed for the work environment. Anyway, you can create like inspection forms and then use Adobe Professional to actually make it into a fillable form and have it on your iPad. If you don't have Adobe Professional, you can just look at it with the Adobe app, the Reader app, and actually write on the form right there. It's really cool. That's how I would have people sign stuff too, right on my tablet. All my coaching observations, my assessments, I did them all on the tablet. I used an app, which is a Mac app, the Excel version, but it's from Apple. Anyway, in that version, it allowed you to have like toggle switches for yes or no or numbers and things like that. And that's how I would do my assessments. So it was actually like an Excel spreadsheet on my tablet. And I would just save it and we would be good to go. We even put our disciplinary action form on the tablet. So if you wanted to write somebody up on the spot, you could. And this was super cool about it too, is that when you're using the tablet, right from there, I could email it to HR, email it to their manager, email it to myself, or I could save it to a Dropbox. So it never had to be printed out and it was in everybody's file. So it was pretty cool. Google Forms. So I had another safety manager do this and it was just awesome. He used Google Forms as his like inspection reports. So he would have his supervisors do a safety walk through their department every day and document it. He would have them fill it out on a Google form that automatically emailed to him. But on top of it, he was able to, it would feed into a Google Sheet that he could then download into Excel and run reports on. Genius. And it's free. It's free, guys. So if your company's not spending any money, that's one way you can do it. You could also do injury reports on the tablet as well. We were trying to move to that where we had an Adobe fill-in form, but you got to make sure you have a signature. So that's the biggest thing. But let's just kind of review everything, right? So what I want you to do is like examine every piece of paperwork that you have and ask yourself, is it really necessary? Who needs to see it and how easy of access is needed? Like how often are they going to look at it and how easy do they need access to it? Right? So like employees, they need really good access, really quick, fast access. But somebody within the facility, it's okay if they need a log on to access it. Maybe a shared drive is good enough, right? And then look at everything that you have and then say, how can I eliminate this step? Not can I eliminate, because that is a closed-ended question. When you ask your brain an open-ended question like, how can I eliminate this paperwork? Your brain will go to work for you and it will start thinking for a way that you can eliminate it. It might come up with like, nope, can't eliminate it. There's no way. But you have to ask that question. And honest, that's the way our brains work. It'll go find an answer for you. And use paper only when you need ease of access or ease of use. And no, this is the one thing about electronic formats. It doesn't necessarily save you time in the front end. In the front end, it might actually take you longer. But in the back end, it might save you time. So like me doing my observations and my assessments on the tablet actually took a tiny bit longer. I actually measured the difference and it was maybe like 5 or 10 minutes longer. But on the back end, I wasn't having to do all the data entry because all the reports were just automatic from the fill-in form. So think about that. So it does save you time on the back end. Alrighty, my friends, that is all I have for you today. If you like this stuff, you love diving deeper into management support and commitment and how to do our jobs effectively, then make sure that you get on my email list. Just go to thesafetygeek.com/5 ways, and I will send you this free guide of 5 ways to make your employees crazy for safety. So stay safe out there, my friends. Stay healthy, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.